This one's a classic.
MapleStory is a big game. It's been around for over 20 years at this point, and there doesn't appear to be any end in sight. If I were to sit here and tell you about every obscure item ever released in this game that now holds over 100,000 items, we'd be here for hours and hours. And I know there are plenty of you out there who wish I was doing that today. So, in pursuit of that ultimate goal of talking at great length about cool things from arguably my favorite game of all time, we're going to be covering some of MapleStory's most interesting and obscure items. Items from the old school era, the Big Bang era, and possibly even later, depending on what I find fascinating. This is another one of those ideas that I've had for years, but just never took the time to execute properly. Before we get into it, this video is sponsored by Eidolon, the free idle MMO you can play right now on Steam. Pets have always been one of my favorite parts of any MMO, as you probably know by now. And the new Grand Tournament in Eidolon is a way to finally put my massive pet collection to use. Thousands of players competing against one another for the ultimate prize, glory in the form of a champion pet. The tournament will begin soon, so stick around and we'll talk about it more later in the video. To start this out, I want to take a look at some of the oldest event items in GMS, ones you're probably very familiar with. These are pieces of data that are literally 20 plus years old now, and while most items in this category are long gone, some collectors have held on to them, which I think is neat. When I was a child, the Halloween candy baskets were everything to me. These were given out to players during the early Halloween events, and despite their complete lack of usefulness, they were highly regarded. Baskets given out from 2006 and beyond are cool and everything. Those are the ones I got my hands on back in the day, but the 2005 pumpkin baskets are particularly special. For whatever reason, the 2005 baskets are different than the baskets released in subsequent years. They have different item IDs, different names, and slightly differing stats while possessing the same sprite. So if your pumpkin basket lacks the 2006 SE appended to the end and has neither a speed nor max HP increase, you're looking at a very rare orange candy basket that Child Togain was a huge fan of. So it's the most important thing you'll ever own. I don't even know why I latched onto these candy baskets so much as a child. It might have been one of the first novelty event items I ever saw in any video game. They held a bit of value at the time, and back when 100,000 mesos was a lot to me, acquiring one of these felt like I had struck it rich. Turns out 100,000 mesos was not very much, even back in 2006, but at least the happy brain chemicals were released whenever I saw one of these in my inventory. And event items were always like that for me. In version 13, way back in November of 2005, snowboards were added to GMS as part of a winter event. Nowadays, GMS finds itself on a 6-month delayed schedule behind KMS's updates, so Nexon often does these cute little seasonal events that are both summer and winter themed, which I think is nice, and I don't often find myself appreciating Nexon's decisions. Back in 2005, though, the update schedule was far less established. Instead of getting winter events in summer or vice versa, we were still receiving a huge backlog of nearly 3 years worth of content from Korea. So these snowboards were just thrown in wherever there was space available for them. They were originally released in the KMS beta back in December of 2003, the Sky, Aqua, Silver, Golden, Dark, and Blood snowboards specifically, the OGs. The only ones I know of to be released after this were the Super Snowboard and Maple Snowboard, but we're not talking about those. These snowboard weapons are all pretty uninteresting as far as weapons go. They're generally considered good options for both warriors and perma-beginners. For warriors though, they really only held this status up until Maple weapons took over the early game meta. For perma-beginners, it was one of many viable options for a good while longer than that. The Sky and Aqua snowboards, both being so low level, were also useful for early first job archers and thieves. Back in the day, it was very much a legitimate strategy to forego any ranged attacks and just grab a cheap snowboard to grind with at Slime Tree. I've done it myself. There was a time very early on in GMS where players were generally broke and unable to comfortably grind at low levels without some kind of compromise like this. This is partially due to the complete lack of knowledge about the game, as well as nobody having had enough time to establish a high-level character to fund whatever they wish to do. A rare combination of circumstances that you really only get for a little while in most contexts. We observed a microcosm of this phenomenon in the early days of Global Artail, where something like a fish spear or yellow umbrella held some major value for a couple days at best. As a kid, just like the pumpkin basket, these snowboards were very important to me. I collected the first 3 before realizing that trying to get anything that cost any amount of mesos was going to be an impossible task for me at 10 years old. I'm pretty sure my silver snowboard didn't even cost me more than 20,000 mesos. But that was still a lot, I guess. And they were so cheap because snowboards were generally easy to come by, and outside of the level 60 blood snowboard that warriors actually wanted to use to grind, they didn't hold much in the way of monetary value. This was still during the second job meta, by the way. Just barely, though. Third job would be released one update later. There are a lot of interesting event items in MapleStory. Not all of them really worth going into, such as the cakes that dropped from the fake boss monsters that would spawn on random maps throughout the game, or the food that you could get during the Thanksgiving event. But for whatever reason, these little sprites really bring me back to my childhood. There will be plenty of time to cover some of the most interesting of these, but for now, let's move on to something that has bothered me for 20 years. Event items are cool, but their lack of usefulness is overshadowed by their novelty value. They're trophies, cool little things to collect that you can show off to other people to demonstrate your superiority. You've been playing the game long enough to have that old item. That makes you better. Even then, not all of the event items are useless or even considered bad by traditional MapleStory standards. But for reasons I have never quite figured out, there are some regular weapons in Old MapleStory that are just bad. And these weapons are not bad for any obvious reason, really. They're not bad because of some weird meta evolution that rendered them useless, or any other kind of player influence. In fact, it probably wasn't even Nexon's fault that these items sucked in most cases. You see, most of these have been around since the very early days, when Wizit was still running the show before MapleStory came to us in GMS. They may be responsible for the entire core of this game, but not every design decision made early on was some incredible feat of game design. One of the first of these bad items that comes to mind is the Shinkita, a level 50 dagger with a cool design that inexplicably has 5 attack speed, 1 attack speed level slower than practically every other dagger in the game. Ever wondered why this weapon seems to be so scarce? It's not just because the Korean fan is so dominant in the dagger space. Level 50 is usually when you would want to upgrade anyway. There are plenty of 3 attack speed daggers, including the Maku series of daggers, which we'll talk about eventually, but there are only a handful of 5 attack speed daggers. The reason this even matters is because attack speed in MapleStory is extremely important. It always has been, but especially when we're talking about Old MapleStory. A difference of 1 attack speed can alter DPS by around 20%, depending on class, which is a huge amount of damage. In order to make up for this difference, you would need the weapon to be able to offset that 20% damage loss in some way. In most cases, this is achievable with raw weapon attack increases or the slower weapon not requiring any stats to equip. Neither of these are the case with the Shinkita, which is only a 13% damage increase over the previous tier option. Not to mention the fact that if your weapon is slower and you're just training, you spend more time in the attacking animation and technically have less control over your character, which just feels bad. So the question is, why would Wizit ever create an item that has slower attack speed without any benefit to offset that disadvantage? This is a question that has haunted me for years. I can't find an answer. The Kebab, for example, requires no stats, so its 5 attack speed is somewhat more justified. The stat you save that you can instead add to luck more than makes up that 20% difference over any kind of stat requiring equivalent dagger. That's not really so much a mystery. But if we look at the Sai, the strength dagger equivalent to the Shinkita, we see that it has normal attack speed. So was Wizit just hoping that strength bandits would be the meta? Well, it seems they did actually want bandits to be designed around strength initially. After all, back in the closed beta of KMS, dagger scrolls used to give strength instead of luck. These were changed pretty early on in April 2003 though, and way before we ever received GMS. But the Shinkita isn't the only weapon to have this bizarre quirk. It's just one that I'm intimately familiar with since I've spent so much time playing Bandit. Even high-level gear released later suffers from the same design flaw with no convenient alternative stat build that might justify the decision. Let's take a look at some warrior weapons, for example. The Berserker, the Redemption, and the legendary Eviscerator, to name a few. Though the Eviscerator as a weapon has its own legacy and bizarre history, along with the fact that it was actually unobtainable, these are all slower attack speed weapons that don't offer substantial damage improvements over their previous tier options. And again, I ask, why? In the case of the Redemption, there was a time where level 70 weapons were the highest level option available, and I guess maybe the thought process was, well, these are the best, so maybe we'll make them a little slower so that it's less appealing to switch to them? Well, that thought made more sense when I started it. I don't know that I have much more to say about these weapons. I have spent years burdened with this knowledge of enigmatic weapon attack speed choices that took otherwise cool weapons and made them practically worthless. Unless you're some kind of higher being who simply doesn't care about damage output. I just can't envision an endgame hero rocking a berserker. It would be cool to see though. Let's move forward a bit to something slightly more beloved than weapons that infuriate me. Deep in Masteria's Phantom Forest, Fiona can be found, an NPC responsible for crafting a number of things. Perhaps some of the most fondly remembered of these things, besides the balanced Fury throwing stars, are the Crimson Arcanon, Arc Glaive, and Arc Lancer. And yeah, these were the only 3 Crimson weapons ever released. One for warriors, one for magicians, and one for archers. Thieves and pirates were left out of this round of unique weapons, but that's okay. We can talk about some of their cool Masteria weapons in the future. The Arcanon is straightforward enough. It was released around the same time as the Elemental Wands, and because it required luck and didn't give bonus elemental damage, it was almost never used as anything more than a novelty or anvil after those were released. The Arc Lancer required the same amount of strength to equip as the Dragon Shiner Bow, which was just better, so the Arc Lancer held a similar novelty status. Even if the Dragon Shiner Bow wasn't available, Nizrox still gave the same amount of attack for 10 less strength. Now, if you're watching the video, you've probably noticed that the Arc Lancer has 5 attack speed, whereas these other ones have 6, meaning it's faster. And I've talked at great length about attack speed in MapleStory, so why am I being so mean to the beautiful, perfect, fastest bow of all time? In third job, the Arc Lancer would actually be a really good option. Rangers were primarily using Strafe, Inferno, Arrow Rain, etc., which are all skills that operate based off of the weapon's attack speed. The only other 5 attack speed bow at this level range is the Blue Metis, which was more accessible than the Arc Lancer by a massive factor, but by the time Rangers become Bowmasters and gain access to Hurricane, attack speed is no longer a practical factor for their DPS. Raw attack power matters a lot more after that point, since Hurricane always fires a fixed 8 arrows per second, and Hurricane is the premier Bowmaster skill. It's so good that other 4th job skills' reliance on attack speed no longer even matters. There's an alternate timeline where Hurricane is based off of attack speed though, and in that world the Arc Lancer is easily best in slot, which is neat to think about. For warriors, the Arc Glaive is weird. At 6 attack speed, it was near average as far as polearms go, but still faster than the Red Surfboard, with slightly higher attack. Dragon Knights were all building hybrid by now, but even then, getting the dex required to equip this thing was not usually something they aspired to achieve. Most warrior weapons didn't require dex to begin with, but as a side effect of warriors all scrolling gear for accuracy and dex, reaching 80 was far from impossible. It was actually something heroes did to equip their stone-toothed swords, which required 120 dex, but those are different circumstances. Because of this, if a Dragon Knight did have the required dex without sacrificing damage, then this is a fine option, but it's an edge case. Red Surfboards were still king, primarily because of their lack of required stats and accessibility, dropping from bonefish and squids, which were both extremely popular monsters for a long period of time. The Arc Glaive, by comparison, requires hundreds of crimson wood to craft, a material which only dropped from the slowly respawning crimson trees at a low rate. Getting your hands on these materials alone would be an extremely expensive or time-consuming process, so the arc glaive at its best was impractical. One of the more interesting aspects of the Crimson Arc Glaive, in my opinion, is the fact that it gives magic attack. As far as I'm aware, it's not possible to use magic attacks with a polearm, so this is another instance of a stat existing on an item that literally makes no sense. Unless I'm wrong, of course, which would be a lame outcome. I prefer being right. The Crimson Arc Glaive also finds use as an endgame perma-beginner weapon, but that's something we'll talk about more soon. The time has come. Eidolon's Grand Tournament is here. The rules are simple. Tournaments take place every day, with everyone in the game competing to see who has the best pet collection. The more pets you have, the better your chances at victory. There's some skill involved, there's some luck involved, and it's exciting to watch. Upsets happen all the time. You get 3 lives, lose 3 matches, and you're out of the tournament, single elimination style. The stakes are high and the rewards are entirely cosmetic. No pay-to-win pet bonuses for placing high. Watching the final matches play out in replays is surprisingly fun. I've never been so hyped to root for my spirit reindeer pet. I even managed to make it to the silver division, but just barely. And this is just one of the many things to explore in Eidolon, as I've learned throughout my time playing. As an idle MMO, it doesn't demand as much of my time as other MMOs, and that's extremely valuable to me these days. I can read through an entire video essay script and check in on my tournament matches whenever I get a chance. Eidolon is available on both iOS and Steam, so I can hop in-game on my phone to check up on things. And whenever I'm at my computer, I can launch the game through Steam, and my account is seamlessly saved to the cloud, which is very convenient. You can play Eidolon for free on Steam and check out the new Grand Tournament using the links posted in the description and the pinned comment. Thanks again to Eidolon for sponsoring this video. I am a longtime warrior main, and Kaiser as a class was one of my favorite releases. A dragon-themed warrior who replaced the hole in my heart that was left behind with Dark Knight's switch away from its original dragon theming. With Kaiser's release came one of the coolest weapons in the game still. Yeah, you have Genesis weapons and Destiny weapons. Whatever. Yeah, the Destiny weapons look really cool. Yes, I want one. But have you ever seen the Kaiserium? A very rare drop from Hard Magnus, who was at one point a difficult boss. This weapon is an outlier from the traditional gear set meta that demanded most players follow a set path of gear progression, CRA to Absolab to Arcane. If one finds a cursed Kaiserium, however, it unlocks a hidden quest line that can be completed by turning in 5 drops exclusive to Hard Magnus, a boss who can only be killed once per week, unless the player farms the reset tickets, which would allow more frequent kills. Add a 100 million meso fee on top of this, and Idea will liberate the cursed Kaiserium, turning it into one of the coolest, best weapons in the game. The Kaiserium, as far as its place within the meta, sits somewhere between an Absolab two-handed sword and an Arcane Umbra two-handed sword, leaning more towards the latter and often beating it out in terms of damage output if the Chad Kaiser has enough resources to pump into the liberated Kaiserium. Alas, I don't believe it gets anywhere near competing with the Genesis two-handed sword, and definitely not with the newish Destiny two-handed sword given their set effects. It's not even close. But that's okay, because this weapon will forever be one of my favorites. Any two-handed sword user can greatly benefit from this weapon, assuming they're lucky enough to find one and aren't anywhere close to getting a Genesis weapon anytime soon. So far, this video has primarily covered weapons. I guess I figured those were the most interesting, but there is a consistent theme with new class releases after a certain point that brought in some cool class release equipment. But I want to specifically talk about the hats. I don't actually know all of these, to be honest. There was a short period of time where new classes were given tradable, unique hats that were themed around their identity, but I think they stopped doing this at some point. The first of these that comes to mind is the Kaisernet. Yes, I found another excuse to talk about Kaiser. When I was getting back into MapleStory, one of my favorite streamers used to rock an anvil of this hat on his Buccaneer while he was grinding to level 275, which was the brand new level cap at the time. When I learned this item existed, it led me down a rabbit hole looking for what other cool class-specific helmets had been added over the years. Ones I could try to collect and use as anvils. I didn't get very far with that. It seems not much has changed since I was 10 years old trying to collect snowboards. So let's go through the list. Raven Persona, released with Phantom, an extremely cool anvil to use and something I still see to this day. I always wanted to get my hands on one, but I've yet to acquire it. Royal Elven Tiara, added in version 104. I don't believe this was released with Mercedes, but was eventually associated with the class. This is one I think I actually own. Devil Horns, also added in version 104. These were released at some point after Demon Avenger, and I believe they were associated with the class, but I also don't think these were a part of the initial class release, just like the Mercedes one. This is another one I think I also own. Thief Goggles, added in version 112. They were originally called Goggles of Counterattack, later renamed in version 114. I really don't know the history of these, and they might not even be associated with any class specifically, but I think it still makes the list. The reason I have for this is that the super old art for Thieves featured a goggled helmet that looked strikingly similar. We've all seen this artwork, it was featured everywhere back in the day, but it wasn't until version 112 that we actually received this as a real item in-game. Before that, the closest we had were the skull caps, which are pretty much the same thing and are legendary in their own way. Hayato's helmet, added in version 137 in preparation for Hayato's upcoming release. This was actually the version where Xenon was released, and it was a rather impactful update overall. This is one I wasn't aware existed for quite a long time. I'm pretty sure I've never seen it before. Kanna's ribbon, also added in version 137 in preparation for Kanna's upcoming release at the time. Again, I've never seen one of these in the wild. Xenon cap, added in version 137 with Xenon's release. This is part of a fursuit, so of course I own an anvil of it. It's one of my most prized possessions. Pointy ear hat, added in version 149, I believe, in preparation for Shade's release in version 151. Also in the same category of animal ears, just a bit more scrunkly. Dogma cap, added with the release of Luminous. This was one of their pieces of event gear. This one always reminded me of those skull caps I mentioned earlier. I really want one of these, but I was never willing to pay the premium people were demanding for it on the auction house. Angel Wing Band, added around the time Angelic Buster was released. This one is really cool, but I always struggled to get it to match with any outfits I could design. And yeah, this is another one I think I actually own. Unless I got rid of it, because it sucked. Mihail's Silver Helm, added with Mihail, of course. This is another one of those that I was never able to really make work with any outfits, but Mihail is one of my favorite classes of all time, so I'm pretty sure I have one of these. It kind of looks like another piece of timeless warrior armor, and so I could never get that association out of my head. Jet's Special Helmet, added with Jet. I found this one when I was looking through the files. I didn't even know it ever existed. If it was really released, it's probably the rarest of the bunch, given Jet's relative unpopularity and eventual, removal from the game entirely. And that's really the extent of my knowledge on the subject. I really like attempting to collect sets of items in MapleStory, this was one of the first ones that I really pursued when I came back to the game. I might have missed some, but these hats are one of the many weird, small MapleStory things that bring me joy. Maybe I'll complete that collection one day. A lot of the things on this list are simply things that I find fun, and they're mostly real, but then you have a category of items that are just not. One of the most popular of these fake items is the Devil Rain throwing stars. The way data is structured in old MapleStory files, and to this day actually, references to items are made in multiple different locations. For example, general item info is stored in one file, but then the text data associated with that item, such as the title and description, are stored in a file specifically for text data. I'm not really a programmer, but I assume this is a very efficient way to quickly access that text data. There exists an entry in the text section referencing Devil Rain throwing stars that has no corresponding data anywhere else. There's no icon, no stats, nothing but the name, description, and item ID. And the description doesn't give us much to work with. All it says is throwing star, which we could have intuited given its location in the game's data. These were added to the files in version 40, the same version where Masteria and NLC were released, so it's possible that these were nothing more than an early version of what eventually became Balanced Furies. I always remembered them being an interesting little piece of old MapleStory trivia, though, things people would bring up as this vague, mysterious thing. The text data for these Devil Rain throwing stars is still in the files to this day. They simply never bothered to remove it. And that's all well and good, but then there are the fake items that Nexon really wanted us to think were real. I've talked about these a number of times before, but I think they definitely belong on this list. The items Nexon would mention in patch notes that were meant to incentivize players to kill bosses that were unkillable at the time. The two instances of this that I'm aware of are the Flame Flowers of Hell and the one who spearheaded Magnus's defeat. The former is so nondescript that we don't even know what slot it was meant to occupy. I don't, at least. It was just included in the patch notes alongside the release of Hilla, and I've never found any corresponding item data for it. The latter of the two, however, is a medal that was promised to the first teams who killed Hard Magnus, dished out on a per-world basis. The promise of a unique item that only a few players would ever get their hands on was more than sufficient for bad actors to hack their way through the fights. And yeah, this is something I've talked about a number of times, but I'm gonna go over it again. The issue with the Magnus medal specifically was that the boss was still given a drop pool. Hackers who killed Hard Magnus were not immediately or even swiftly banned. Magnus's drops were tradable, so you can do the math. The technically unobtainable for the time pieces of armor flooded the market immediately, and the scope of this mass exodus of gear from hackers' inventories was so large that Nexon didn't even manage to remove them all. A process that, by the way, only punished the victims of the scheme, who either willingly or unwillingly purchased gear that was likely to be deleted. The thing is, the hackers had already made their money by RMTing at that point anyway, so they got what they were after. I just find it so astonishing that they would willingly set a trap like this and then not even watch it properly. It's like setting a trap for bunnies, but instead of using some pieces of lettuce, you use your entire farm as bait, and then you let them eat freely for 2 months before catching one of them while the others run away fat and happy. And this event lives rent-free in my head. I will always talk about it. I bring it up at parties. I'm very fun. And the last fake item I want to talk about in this video is the pink maple bandana, but this one's pretty simple and not really as fun as the Magnus thing. In version 23, which was the first GMS anniversary event, as well as the release of Zachem, the patch notes make reference to a pink maple bandana. Alas, the story here is simply that it was probably a typo. No pink maple bandana existed at the time, and the patch notes inexplicably omitted one of the other bandanas that were released. The mystery only lasted a short while and eventually just became a piece of trivia. And this is just barely after the lost media era of old school MapleStory, so this one is mostly just the idea of the mystery for players of the time, rather than much that was ever actually documented. Those are most of the fake items I know of for now. Feel free to let me know of any more in the comments. There are so many things to potentially cover, and in this case I'm definitely looking for input. Sometimes I'll just look through game files and find something interesting that catches my eye, so I have a nearly endless supply of cool things to talk about, and I will always find more. But if there's anything you want to see, leave a comment and let me know. I'm always very excited to talk about more interesting and obscure items.